third option in the passing game, and Mike Davis is a perfectly capable receiver out of the backfield too. Ryan led the league in passing attempts last season, was 4th in yards, and 12th in touchdowns, and that was with Jones completing only 7 games. Ryan was also 3rd in red zone attempts and targets to the end zone. And with 2 serious threats inside the 20 like Pitts and Ridley, who caught 7 of his 9 scores inside the 20 last year, there's reason to believe Ryan could easily cross the 30 touchdown threshold again this season. Ryan is currently the 17th quarterback going off the board with an ADP of 138 on Underdog Fantasy. He makes for a fantastic stacking option with Ridley, Pitts, Gage, or even a late round flyer like Olamide Zaccheaus, and has one of the highest floors at his position. Now we just need him to produce one of those ceiling years like we've seen him do plenty of times in the past. Aaron Rodgers is coming off an MVP season in Green Bay where he threw for a career-high 48 touchdowns and accounted for 51 scores overall. Amazingly, he finishes the QB3, not the QB1, behind Josh Allen and Kyler Murray, which just proves how valuable rushing upside is for quarterbacks who may not be elite passers like Rodgers. We'll get to that in a little bit. Since being installed as the Packers' full-time starter back in 2008, Rodgers has posted top 2 finishes at his position in 7 of 11 seasons, where he played at least 15 games. The other 4 finishes, 3rd, 7th, 10th, and 11th. He's currently being drafted as the QB 13 with a 112 ADP on Underdog, and as I'm sure you've heard me say many times before, basically no player is undraftable if they fall far enough in the draft. With the uncertainty swirling around Rodgers' status in Green Bay, there's no way we're drafting him as a top 5 or 6 quarterback right now, which is where he'd likely be going otherwise. But taking a shot on him outside of the starter range is huge. This is also where drafting earlier in the summer can help pay huge dividends if you're smart about it. And it's looking more and more like he'll play this year, whether that's for the Packers or somewhere else. But even if the damage in Green Bay is irreparable, there are teams who would surely love to have the 3-time MVP on their roster. Rodgers' lack of rushing upside limits his ceiling, and he's actually only eclipsed 4,500 passing yards once in his career. But he had the 2nd lowest percentage of bad passes in the league last year at 14.3%. Deshaun Watson led the league at 14.2%. Rodgers was sacked on only 3.5% of his dropbacks and led the league in both adjusted completion percentage and passer rating. And if that's not enough, Rodgers was an absolute beast on end zone throws, with 25 passes to the end zone resulting in touchdowns. Not to mention, he also led the league with 4 touchdowns of 50-plus yards. And with a touchdown interception ratio of 155 to 24 over the last 5 seasons, you know you're getting an elite quarterback at less than half the cost, assuming, of course, that he's on the field for week 1. I'm beginning to think he will be. Matthew Stafford finished as a top 10 quarterback in all but 1 season between 2011 and 2017, but has since finished 20th, 29th, and 15th over his last 3 seasons. But upon further inspection, there's really no reason to be concerned. First, Stafford only had Kenny Golladay for 4 full games last season, where he was the wide receiver 11 over those weeks. Second, coaching hasn't exactly been stellar in Detroit, and by almost all reports, it seems like there wasn't a single player in the Lions locker room who had any respect for Matt Patricia over his 2+ years as the Lions head coach. Third, and maybe most important, Stafford was on pace for almost 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns through 8 games in 2019 before a back injury sidelined him for the second half of the season. He did have good pass blocking last year, though, and Darrell Bevell wasn't exactly a bottom-of-the-barrel offensive coordinator. But when your top passing option is Marvin Jones and you rank 30th in the run game, things generally don't go your way. Now Stafford will replace Jared Goff in Los Angeles and play under a head coach in Sean McVay, who has been celebrated as an offensive genius for years now. The Rams' offensive line showed marked improvement in 2020 and got the run game working again after an ugly 2019. But Jared Goff remained a liability, posting the lowest ADOT in the league behind only Drew Brees and attempted a dismal 7.8% of his passes 20-plus yards downfield. Second to last behind, you guessed it, Drew Brees. Goff completed only 30% of those.
All right. Good morning. Welcome in. Game 5. It's winding down, folks. So we appreciate you popping in with us bright and early on a Saturday morning for another NBA strategy show. Myself and Adam have the next hour with you to break down a bunch of different angles, talk about how you can make some money out there from cash games to tournaments and anything in between, from studs to punts, and of course, looking at captains and MVPs. A reminder, not just here today, brought to you by No House Advantage. Chris in the house producing. So if you see him in the chat, make sure you send a shout out at Ship My Money DFS for Adam, at Shander Show for me. As you saw, as we just opened up, the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel up and running. So you want to make sure you do the same thing for that channel as you are for us. You are throwing likes on every video you see. And most importantly, you're subscribed to the channel, notification bell, and everything else. What's up, Adam? Good morning, brother. You look pretty good today for a Saturday.
Yeah, didn't go out last night. Went and grabbed lunch at the bar below my apartment, and the bartender came in at like 4:30, looked at me and goes, "The sun's still up. What the hell are you doing here?" But yeah, I didn't go back out last night. So feeling the best that I have on a Saturday show in a while.
Yeah, and last time we spoke, you were on your way out for a long weekend in D.C. to celebrate. It was a bachelor party or birthday party, one of the two, right?
Yeah, it was. I just went for that one night for the birthday party, but then I decided, with it being the baseball All-Star break, I just booked the room for the entire week. So I just got back yesterday.
Oh, nice. All right. So that was an extended little trip for you.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Good for you. Nothing wrong with a little extra spending and a little extra, especially if it's on you, by all means. So back now, we've got game 5 tonight. And as we have been doing with these showdowns, these single games, trying to just hit a bunch of different angles. And before we kind of look at tonight, I'm just curious to see how the flow of this series you think is going to impact maybe tonight. And just looking at what's happened realistically, at least for me, 2 straight wins by Milwaukee. Okay, the series now tied at 2, but 3 straight wins for Milwaukee, and that third being on the road. It doesn't look like Phoenix is hobbled or running for cover by any means. So just my gut feel at the start of the show, not even from a DFS standpoint, but just overall, would be based on kind of the flow of the series. A lot's leaning towards Phoenix tonight.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you kind of can discount that first game in Milwaukee. I think the Scott Foster game, like that was a game that they probably were going to lose anyway. It was a road game, but like that obviously didn't do them any favors either. Then last game Milwaukee played really well. Chris Paul played really poorly, which is not something we've seen much of this postseason. So I expect Phoenix to right the ship and get a home win here. If they don't, obviously they are in a lot of trouble. But yeah, I mean, I assume this swings back towards Phoenix.
Yeah, and just a reminder here for the people that forget, this thing started out 2-0 Phoenix, and 4 teams in finals history have come back and won that. So I feel like every game Milwaukee won, those 2 games Milwaukee won, people were trying to push this. Oh, here we go. We're going 7. And now it's a series. There's still a lot of history that works in favor towards Phoenix. And as you mentioned, game 1 in Milwaukee, discounting that, it's definitely feeling like Milwaukee has done everything they possibly can just to keep their head above water, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's how it feels to me too. Like again, in game 3, you had DeAndre Ayton play 24 minutes because of foul trouble. That's a game that, like, if Milwaukee doesn't win that game, they're just completely screwed. Game 4, Chris Paul's been turning the ball over a lot lately anyway, 5, 4, and 6 turnovers in the last 3 games. But you had another 5 turnovers from Chris Paul. He only shot 38% from the field. It just was a game where he didn't play that well. Devin Booker played really well in terms of scoring. But yeah, it was just, to me, what's the saying? The series doesn't start until a road team wins.
Yes.
So we still haven't seen a road win yet, which still means the series is going not how the Suns necessarily would like, but it's still going in favor of the Suns.
Exactly. And I think that's why we see it. Odd Shopper, of course, where we'll be talking about a bunch of different odds to player props. And again, No House Advantage will tell you a little bit more about our sponsor. But real quick, as far as NHA, there is something going on specifically today. You have a $50 first match deposit. That's today only. So all of you who already know about NHA and you're thinking, it's kind of on the fence about that. I've heard Shander and Adam and a bunch of guys talk about it. Well, today would be the day because they bumped it up to $50. Again, we'll tell you a little bit more in depth about all the benefits of NHA. But one thing, just looking at Odd Shopper, there still is a pretty definitive weight. I mean, it's above that number 3. It's 4.5, depending on where you're finding the best look. And, the total was dropped a little bit below at 218. It looks like it's moved up a little bit. But to your point, from the books to, I think, the confidence level of just people like us talking about it to what we've seen on the floor, it's 2-2, but it still feels like it's Phoenix is up. And I don't see how Milwaukee evens that, Adam. Even if they play tight tonight and they keep it to a 2 maybe possession game and they lose by 5, I don't change my opinion about it still being like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Suns are the better team. Granted, I also do think Milwaukee's very good. So it's not like it would be shocking. I mean, basically, the way I look at it now is because Milwaukee was able to handle business at home, you turn this into a 3-game series, which obviously increases variance, and it makes it more likely that the Bucks win than if they had lost a game at home. That goes without saying. But I still think Phoenix is the better team. It's just now you have a 3-game series where both teams are still very, very good. You can certainly see Milwaukee luck into a game they're not supposed to win and win the series, but still in favor of the Suns, I think, and I expect them to get game 5 tonight.
What do you think is more likely to happen? Suns win 2 straight, close it out in 6, or the series gets pushed to 7 and Milwaukee wins on the road?
I think Suns in 6 is more likely than Bucks in 7.
Okay. I was hoping you say that because I'm holding a nice Suns in 6 ticket. Now, this is not like Greg Ehrenberg bragging to the world about jumping on this team before the first tip of the season, but I'll be pretty happy if that's Suns. So that's where my mind is as far as me being biased. It's been rooting for the Suns since the jump. Now, as far as tonight, just how do you feel the game flow going? And this is where we could start looking and talking a little bit deeper about captains and maybe a different option at MVP if it's not an obvious choice with Giannis. But just as far as, looking at what we just talked about, as far as what we've seen with this series, how do you see the game playing out tonight? Because we both feel like Phoenix has the advantage. It's clearly back now in Phoenix, so there's weight on the side of the Suns. But again, this could be a 20-point blowout for you, Adam. This could be a game in which Phoenix is coming and clawing from behind in order to win it. What's the flow like to you?
I expect it to be relatively close. I mean, it's a 4.5, 5-point spread. So I'm approaching it like it's going to be a competitive game. I think that, again, I think the Suns pull it out. But I'm not expecting it to get out of hand or anything like that.
All right, let's look at, I want to almost get the obvious out of the way, and that would be the MVP spot on FanDuel, because it feels like for this series, even if you don't like Giannis at the MVP spot, that's a pretty significant pivot from the public. So is it clearly just locking Giannis in on the MVP spot before we kind of get a little bit more in depth where there is a little bit of variety at the captain?
I think so. I mean, it just goes back to how I think how flawed FanDuel's single game structure is. Giannis just projects so much higher than every other player on the slate, and you don't have to pay any extra money to put him in that slot as opposed to the other ones. So, like you alluded to, there's a lot more nuance on DraftKings, a lot more to talk about. On FanDuel, he's getting 64% MVP ownership. That might actually be a little bit low just because, again, if you don't play him at MVP, what are you hoping happens? Devin Booker somehow outscores Giannis, which, I guess could happen. But it's almost to me, if you don't play Giannis at MVP, you may as well just not play him and just hope he gets hurt or something. I don't really know what, I can't really think of a good roster construction that assumes Giannis plays a full game and doesn't think he scores the most points.
Yeah, it's almost the plan Z, where it's like Giannis twists his ankle in 3 minutes and Bobby Portis takes over, and you've that 1% lineup of no Giannis and Bobby Portis as the MVP. I don't even know how that would play out otherwise.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not advocating to do that. I'm just saying
Sure.
I think I would rather just be very close to 100% Giannis at MVP.
Yeah, and to your point, and let's just look at that 99 right percentile to that other percent. You're still rostering Giannis. Just to be clear, if you roll with Booker as your MVP, you're still rostering Giannis as your star.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but it's just kind of the point that I was getting to is if assuming Giannis plays the entire game and is healthy, how does anyone else score? I mean, he projects probably 12, 13 points higher than anyone else on the slate. So it's just it feels probably equally likely that that he plays a full game but gets beat by someone as that like he gets hurt. Like I think it's just such a low probability thing that you get a full healthy game from Giannis and someone else beats him. So again, I would just lean towards going over the 64% on FanDuel. It's one of those situations where it's not ideal for large field tournaments to be like jamming over the field on someone that popular, but it just comes back to the flaw in the game design from FanDuel. I would rather just accept that they have a flawed game and then I'm going to duplicate a lot than light money on fire because their game sucks and I still insist on like being different. It's just, I think it's just a poor game. And if you're going to play it, you just kind of have to accept that you're going to duplicate a lot because 64% of the field's playing Giannis the captain and it's probably too low.
Yeah, you can't just spite the tournament because you don't like it and then not roster Giannis. You'll go broke fast pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It's
It's great. All right, make sure you're using our ownership projections free today for you. We have a couple of things actually free for you on site. It's $29.95 for the week to be a part of Awesemo Plus. So it's really not much. It's easy and it's a simple process to be signed up. And then you have access to everything across the site. Today, we have a couple of things across the board on this busy Saturday. The single game showdown ownership projections, which you should be using anyway. Today, it's a great compliment to the show as Adam is talking about who he's looking at, maybe fading. You have the ownership projections in front of you. Top stacks for baseball and the UFC Pro Plays. See more people popping in. So you know what to do is you come in, you hit the like button, make sure you subscribe. You can even hit that share button and put it out to any of your social media vehicles of choice. It doesn't matter, whatever you're on. We appreciate the look and make sure, you let people know what's happening in here. I did see Rozo Music on the chat. Giannis's PRA is 52.5. And I'm thinking, 2/3 of that is easily points with what we're expecting from him tonight, if not more.
Yeah, I'm looking now to see what I haven't adjusted my projections, but my baseline stuff. Like 31 points, 13 rebounds, 5.5 assists.
That's insane. So that covers the 52.5, right? Yeah, actually, NHA has him projected at 49.7. Oh, no, 49.7 PRA. So I'm terrible at math. That's why I wasn't able to add up what you just said real quick. So I was hoping that you had the sum beyond the numbers.
No, I did not. It's in the ballpark. I think it's a little low, but yeah.
Okay. On the surface, it seemed like a heavy smash, but that's why we have someone like Adam here to check the initial emotion and say, whoa, hold on. Based off projections and models here, you may be better off. Look, if it's a difference of 3 points, if you have 49.5 and his PRA is set at 52.5, I'm trusting you and I'm smashing that under. All right, let's look at the flip here now from MVP and FanDuel, which is very easy conversation, to now it gets a little bit more difficult here. And I imagine that cash games, you're taking a similar approach where Giannis is your captain in DraftKings before we start looking at some variety in tournaments.
Most likely. I mean, that would be at least what I try and do right off the bat. I do think that there's some pricing to exploit on DraftKings. We've seen the salaries on the Suns drop in a couple of spots, one being Chris Paul, who's down to 8,800, one being DeAndre Ayton, who's down to 8K. And then you also have Cameron Johnson at 4K coming off another game where he played close to 30 minutes. So
love that.
Giannis is where I'd be starting and trying to build a good lineup there. But because I do think that Paul is underpriced, Ayton's underpriced, and Johnson to some extent is underpriced, I wouldn't be dead set on Giannis if I end up needing the savings. I do think Paul is a reasonable option. I do think Ayton's a reasonable option.
So Paul becomes your number two. Now, let's just look at this across the board, and you could apply it to cash or to tournaments. Giannis is going to be the guy you're going to get to the most, it sounds like, as far as your captain, even if that's not overweight to the field just for you per se. Chris Paul is number two?
Yeah, I think Chris Paul's number two. He's not been as productive in this series as he was in previous ones, He's averaged 1.01 DraftKings points per minute, but the rates are still very good. He has a 26.4% usage percentage. He has a 35.7% assist percentage, which, while that's a good number, it's actually lower than you would expect for him. Normally, he's going to be in that 41 to like 43% range. So I think maybe you see that bounce back a little bit. The turnovers have been an issue. Maybe that is a result of Jrue Holiday being really good. Maybe it's Chris Paul making some bad decisions. Maybe it's a combination of both and they come down a little bit. But I still think that Chris Paul's kind of playing, I don't want to say at his floor because he probably could play worse, but he's playing pretty close to his floor, I think, in terms of fantasy production so far. So you're getting a decreasing salary on Chris Paul, even though there's no real reason for it. Like, he's still going to play close to 40 minutes. He's coming off of 36.6 minutes last game. So let's call it like 37, 38 minutes here. Even if he gets a fantasy point per minute, that's respectable at 8,800. And this is someone that during the regular season was around 1.2 fantasy points per minute. That's what we had seen from him against in previous series when he was healthy as well. So I think you see that production come up most likely. But even if you don't, it's not the end of the world at this salary.
Yeah, I love how you lay it out with Paul and Eytan, because you can also see that with Holiday and Middleton, guys priced up from what they've done over the last two games and almost not catching up to the expected regression to the means, right? Where it's not like Middleton's going to fall off the face of the earth or Jrue Holiday is unplayable, but it feels like a lot of the salary here heading into game 5 is more reflective of what happened as opposed to what should happen tonight. Like, if our game flow that we laid out at the start, Adam, plays out and Phoenix is just in control. Milwaukee's playing and they're competing, but Phoenix is in control. It's not going to be Devin Booker dropping 55 points and everybody just standing around with their mouth open.
Yeah, and it's kind of just like the most generalized way that I could say to approach single game postseason slates or even postseason slates in general is to just attack falling prices on players that are coming off of a disappointing game or two that are in no danger of losing playing time or anything like that. So I think that, that clearly points to Chris Paul as one of those guys where, again, it's a very general statement, but that's one of the easiest ways to just like think about how you need to approach these slates. And it's to just get the falling price. It's just like in the regular season where if you have a guy who, you have a known commodity that's a very good scorer, he shoots poorly 3 games in a row and his salary falls, you just start jamming that guy into lineups because he's going to bounce back sooner than later. That's the same situation you're in with Chris Paul here.
Does that work from more of a general? I love this strategy because I think that the earlier you are, like today, for example, we're a bunch of hours before lock. This is something that you could really look at. It's not 6 or 7 minutes before and you're racing to swap guys out. This is definitely something that you can apply throughout lineups and really throughout the board here as we get deeper. But does that also work on the flip side with the two guys I just mentioned as the sitting examples in front of us with Holiday and Middleton? And again, it's not fading or redlining guys, but if you are going to take advantage and exploit the low cost based off of a bad game, do you then in turn sacrifice maybe some more ownership as a result of guys in this particular case, like a Middleton or Holiday, who are still priced up, even though we expect there to be a little bit of a fallback?
Yeah, so with those guys, it's not even so much that their price has increased. So you're not like necessarily looking at them and saying, oh, they're overpriced because they played well lately. I think they're priced where they should be. If you take Chris Middleton and take him from 10.4 to like 9,500, he looks fantastic. If you knock Jrue Holiday down sub 9K, he looks great. But where their ownership starts to drop off and where your exposure to them probably drops off is relative to the players with the decreasing salary. If you hold the salary close to constant on guys like Middleton and Jrue, but then you take players like Paul and Eytan who are comparable to Middleton and Jrue, and you slash their price by $500 or $600, then relatively they're just going to look much better, and that's reflected in the ownership as well. When you look at the captain ownership on DraftKings, you're getting Chris Paul with the second most, you're getting Eytan third, then Booker, then Holiday, then Middleton, or actually no, then Middleton, then Holiday. So it is reflected in the ownership, and that is a spot where in tournaments you can certainly play that ownership game and say, I going to play Chris Middleton at lower ownership. But when you're thinking about it in terms of cash games or just most likely to succeed relative to Middleton and Holiday, Eytan and Paul look a lot better because their salaries drop.
The problem here, just getting back to the captain spot, is you could see as we have the ownership projections up there and you have it ranked, as Chris has it ranked properly. And thank you, sir. down there on the captains, that's exactly where I wanted to go. Is the only real pivot is, I mean, we'll talk about Cam Johnson, who I think would be a great option at 4K, especially if you want to fit in everybody at the top. But as far as Middleton and Holiday, it's unfortunate because it looks like the field, the public has caught up to that, right? And they've realized, well, wait a second, why am I spending 10-4 plus, actually? It's 15-6, the captain rate for a Middleton, or for a Holiday more so at what, 14-4, when I get Chris Paul or DeAndre Ayton on the cheap. So maybe not the majority of your lineups, but do you anticipate getting to a couple of pivot lineups where you're just spending up for Middleton / Paul, Middleton / Holiday at the captain, really just to pivot away from ownership?
Yeah, I think so. Again, it's not the most likely play to succeed, but you're getting like half the ownership for Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday at captain as you are for Chris Paul, for example. Ayton a little bit lower than Paul, but still higher than Holiday and Middleton. And that's where it comes back to, in tournaments, you're still talking about a 1-game sample size. Chris Middleton can certainly go out there, score 55 fantasy points again. Chris Paul can go score, 23 last game. But even, say he goes and gets 35 or 40, you're going to want Middleton at captain if that happens. So in terms of just the chances of Paul beating Middleton, I don't think it's 2-1. And if you're just using, an optimizer and not using any randomness and not accounting for ownership or anything like that, you're just going to get way more Chris Paul because he's the better point per dollar play. But in tournaments, with the ownership how it is, I do think Middleton and Holiday end up being really, really good captain options.
Real quick on Giannis with the captain spot, just crunching a bunch of lineups here on Awesemo. And again, I'm using our site's projections here, so not your model or someone else's model so much, just what we have here with Alex. And I was a little surprised. I don't know if this is surprising to you, especially counter to the ownership, where clearly he's at 25%, just under, which again is a quarter of the field. It's not like 70% as he is owned across the board as a utility. But Giannis, the first lineup that pops up crunched is the 10th lineup to get to Giannis as the captain. Is that surprising to you based off of our models, not yours?
Not really. I mean, he's just expensive. Like, there's not a ton of good value in this series because of it being, the finals and teams are running tight rotations. So there's not a lot of good value you're going to feel good about. And you do have those dropping prices on Paul and Ayton. So like if you put Giannis in at captain, it leaves you $6,220 on DraftKings per position for the rest of your lineup. If you just look at the guys that are less than that, there's not a whole lot there that you feel good about putting into your lineup. And as far as like the value goes, like Torrey Craig at 2,400 is probably the cheapest guy you'll feel even remotely comfortable with. Even putting him in, that only bumps you up to like 7,200. There's still not players below 7,200 you feel good about. You just end up with some pretty mediocre lineups, I think.
Yes. All right. What about Ayton at the captain spot? I'm starting to like him more and more and more based off of your strategy, taking advantage of the 8K. And look, I'm not saying that Chris Paul isn't the best or second best option, even in a cash, but just looking at Ayton in lineups for tournaments, seems like the 8K spending up, of course, for the captain role is probably going to pay off because you could still get Giannis in there and you could still maneuver a couple of other studs in your lineup as well.
Yeah, I really like going to Ayton the captain. It only costs you $12K. It leaves you $7,600 per position. Let's say you throw Connaughton or Cam Johnson in there. Using Cam Johnson, it puts you to like $8,500. You can make, pretty solid lineups where you have Ayton, Giannis, Paul. You don't have to necessarily go down to Torrey Craig. You can do like a little bit better using like Cam Johnson and Pat Connaughton, for example, instead of Torrey Craig if you wanted to. It just opens up a little bit more flexibility if you do different stuff. So I do really like Ayton the captain.
Is there anybody on Milwaukee outside of the big three that you may even in like I guess it would be Brook Lopez, or maybe some long shot that Pat Connaughton is keeping this team in the game with 9 or 10 looks from outside, or maybe it's a blowout factor, which again, this seems to be the most likely case in which Phoenix could. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm not shocked by any means if Phoenix walks away with a 14-point victory and the last 8 or 9 minutes is Milwaukee just trying to chip away at an 18-point lead.
Yeah, so I mean, other than the main three guys, I think if you're going somewhere on Milwaukee, I think it's probably Connaughton. Kind
Just
of,
because he's cheap?
and because he probably plays more minutes than Lopez or Portis. So I mean, the one thing that I'm kind of thinking is right now we have Lopez and Portis both projected for less than 1% ownership on DraftKings. The the Bucks have been playing small, like enough that neither of those guys look like great options at their respective salaries. Like last game, for example, you got 19 minutes from Lopez, you got 20 minutes from Portis. Lopez at 6K, Portis at 5,400. If they each play around 20 minutes, you're not getting there, and that's why the captain ownership is so low. But what if, for one reason or another, the rotation plays differently here? What if Brook Lopez is having success against DeAndre Ayton, and we get back to those 28 to 30-minute games of Brook Lopez? What if Bobby Portis is having success and he plays 26 minutes or something? Those guys do produce at a high enough rate where if they play for whatever reason, like 8 to 10 minutes more than everyone's expecting them to, they can really make a difference for you. Whereas Pat Connaughton, I think it's reasonable to expect he plays 30 to 32. I don't think there's the potential for him to get like 8 minutes more. So it's kind of like, I think there's a little bit more volatility in the playing time for Brook Lopez and Portis. I think the most likely outcome is, again, that you see around 20 minutes apiece for those guys, give or take. But there is some volatility there where you could get more minutes and they're getting no ownership. So if you're playing 150 lineups in tournaments, I think maybe getting to those guys a little bit, getting overweight on the field, not saying to jam them into like the majority of your lineups or anything, makes some sense just because the rotation could change. But again, I think the most likely outcome is that they are close to useless at their salaries.
Is there anybody else? And the only other name that I'm really thinking from a captain spot would be to truly try and take advantage of cost and then rostering as many big cost guys as you'd like, because you hit it right away at 4K for Cam Johnson as utility, bump it up on the captain spot, and then to be able to roster in basically whoever the hell you want, including Giannis and Paul. That seems to be the only low cost, and Connaughton is the the punt in that regard. But if we're expecting Phoenix to win, we're expecting Cam Johnson to get a lot of minutes at 4K. That may be the only low cost captain that you can justify.
Yeah, I think he's for sure the easiest to justify. He played, so 2 games ago, he played 30 minutes. That was the game DeAndre Ayton was in foul trouble. So the expectation going into game 4 was that Cam Johnson would go back to his normal like 20 minutes or so a game. But we actually saw him get run over Mikal Bridges. He played 28.6 minutes. Again, he could certainly go back to around 20 minutes here. There's no guarantee that he plays over Bridges. But the reason I think there's a decent chance that he does is we've just seen we've seen Bridges not really getting fourth quarter minutes when the Suns have the option not to give them to him, but pretty decent amount. Like if you go back even to the game against the Clippers, I think it was, the closeout game, I think it was against the Clippers, where Torrey Craig played like 32 minutes and Bridges didn't play in the fourth quarter. I think that there's just enough times we've seen the Suns go away from Bridges that it's reasonable to think that Johnson has a path to upper 20s minutes. And at 4K, even if he does play 20 to 22, you're not dead in the water. He can still give you a good enough score. And if you use him at captain, you're sacrificing raw points there, but it's going to make it so that you can do pretty much whatever else you want with the rest of your lineup. You'd have $8,800 per position to spend. Assuming you go to Giannis, you're still going to have $7,850. So, you need like one more semi-value play, but it just opens up a lot for you if you do that.
And just looking at Bridges, No House Advantage has him predicted very low as far as an output is concerned. And the pricing, as we see, dropped a little bit, right? But still not really reflective of what you can get. And speaking of No House Advantage, just as we've told you at the start, there's a pretty cool offer today, and we'll tell you about it throughout right now, but $50 is what they're bumping it up to just today for a first match deposit. So make sure you head over to No House Advantage. You take advantage of NHA, everything from their optimal lineups to the projections that we use all the time here. If it's in show or if it's just matching it up with odds shopper and trying to find the best value for individual player props. And again, Mikal Bridges pops up as one of the stronger under favorites. This is assists for him because NHA has it at 2.5 and he's projected at 1.78. But if it's injury, if it's concerns about whether the guy's going to play or not, you can pop in early on the day on NHA, lock in. It's not going to change. And these projections are based off of calculations here that we all trust on Awesemo. So you're getting the best information and really the best odds when it comes to lines out there. You're always beating the books. Trust me, I'm here in PA where it's legal, and I'm amazed all the time at the value at NHA that is sucked out from me on any of these betting apps, Adam. It's sickening how much they take advantage of us. So I love the fact that NHA exists as a counter.
Yeah, for sure. You can get some pretty stale lines too, which is nice.
Yeah, I was looking at Lopez. A couple of these, everybody who is fading tonight is under, at least, is on the Bucks, and I think that's another thing. And real quick, in case you are new to NHA, use our promo code Awesemo. Normally, it's a $20 first match deposit. Today, it's $50. So already, it's more than double they're giving you, from 20 to 50. Take advantage of that bonus today. Use our promo code Awesemo. Outside of the captain spot, and we can look at this with the assumption, I think, that the captain for at least the majority of discussion here, if it's Paul or Eytan, kind of in a rotation like that, but especially with those two guys as my captain just crunching, I have a really hard time getting to any other buck outside of Giannis. And that's maybe with a sprinkle of like a super low cost PJ Tucker, just because I know he's going to get minutes, although I don't really trust what I can get from him. I feel like there's going to be a lot of blue and like maybe one green lineups for me tonight. Do you anticipate that kind of being the color scheme as well?
What do you mean?
Like basically 5 Suns and 1 Buck, and that 1 Buck, that lone Buck being Giannis, outside of like a sprinkle of a PJ Tucker here and maybe paying up for if it's Holiday or Middleton.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance I get like some 4-2s also. But yeah, I like Phoenix, I think, is just the more favorably priced team here by far.
Who is that too? Do you anticipate, right? And it doesn't have to be specific, right? If you haven't built anything yet. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just want to clarify.
No, I mean, I haven't, but like using Connaughton for value, using PJ Tucker for value, which is a miserable experience usually, but he's face
as you said that.
Yeah.
You look like you rolled in here like being up all night, and you were just like one small whiff of rubbing alcohol was going to make you throw up for an hour. Like that was your look as you said that.
Yeah, I mean it's not fun, but like take what's available. So yeah, I mean, like getting some PJ Tucker, getting some Pat Connaughton as that second guy, but like I would fully expect to have a lot more exposure overall to Phoenix than to Milwaukee, just based on the pricing.
All right, and that's I think more of the conversation here about the Blues, about the 4, the 5s, and look, from the obvious names of Paul and Eytan up there at the top, is it just an assumption that you're going to get to a lot of Booker? He's just as utility, or do you find yourself maybe trying to get ahead of what could be a cooling off of Devin Booker, not because he stinks, but just because of other guys taking maybe more advantage of either minutes or just being at home and better opportunities?
I think I probably get to Booker. I'm probably more underweight on Booker than any of the other stars. And the reason is that, for one, he's getting more ownership than Middleton. For two, he's, the third most expensive guy behind Giannis and Middleton. But you just don't typically get the peripherals with him to justify his price point. So the minutes are there. The minutes are great. But even just looking back to last game, you kind of see the issue with Booker. He scored 42 actual points and got you 46 DraftKings points. Obviously, you're going to expect more than 2 assists and 1 rebound, in a normal game. But he just doesn't contribute a lot in the way of peripherals when Chris Paul's healthy and playing as many minutes as Paul is. So I think that Booker's the guy that I probably end up getting the least of out of that group.
Now, there's one guy who I absolutely love, but I think the pricing may be a little bit of a turnoff for people. I don't think it's basically like Crowder and Bridges have swapped when it comes to pricing. And we've seen everybody except the books, and we'll get to that coming up because there's a great prop you can take advantage of on Odd Shopper with Crowder. But at 7,400, I feel like Crowder is the one guy out there who's bulletproof to surroundings or circumstance, where they could be down, they could be up. He's going to get looks. He's going to get opportunities for, even if it's rebounds more so than assists, not to say he's going to get double digits there, but scoring and 3-point shots, looks. I feel like Crowder is going to be out there. And unlike Bridges at that price point, as we've seen earlier, Adam, you don't get anywhere near the ROI on spending up for that. So I happen to love Crowder tonight. Now, you're going to talk me out of it or solidify that either way.
No, I'm probably not going to do either because I feel very neutral on Jay Crowder.
Oh.
I don't like the salary. He just doesn't produce that many fantasy points. Last game he obviously had a really good game that was on the back of 3 blocks and 3 steals. What I do like for Crowder is the playing time he's gotten in this series. He played about 39 minutes last game, and he only shot 30% from the field. I thought that was a really good sign because he's another one that sometimes sometimes his minutes can disappear. You can get more minutes going to Johnson, you get more minutes going to Bridges. I thought the fact that they left him out there even when he wasn't shooting really well is a really, really good sign for kind of how they view him versus Bridges in terms of who's getting those minutes. So I like the playing time. Obviously, he can get hot from 3 and pay off the salary. He can run into another, fluky defensive game and pay off his salary. So I don't like the salary. I do like the playing time. I think he's, for a 1-game slate, I think he's fine. If we had multiple games, I would not be paying $7,400 for Crowder.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about price when it comes to it. And by the way, your mic sounds fine to me. We have one of, if not our top producer on the channel running this show, and Chris. So I think there might be something wrong with Roy Davis' connection. I'm going to default on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I was going to default to, because typically if something doesn't sound good, the entire chat lets you know immediately.
Exactly. That's the best thing about it. It's like, dude, you could just show up and it's like, do you have a rough night last night? Or what's that behind you? Did you switch your poster out? Or did you let your hair grow? What's up with your beard? That's before we even start the show. There's 50 people in the chat waiting to say that.
Yeah, exactly. Not much goes unmentioned.
That's great. No, I didn't want anybody else to think like there was this growing problem. It's a Roy problem. It's not an R problem, but we appreciate Roy hanging out, even if the connection is suspect. The chat not liking my Crowder over Bridges play tonight. A lot of people in love with the idea that Bridges has another slate-breaking game tonight. Look, I'll gladly be wrong, but and I guess this is more to what you were just saying. If it was simply a matter of final roster spot, you had the cash, Crowder over Bridges, Bridges over Crowder, are you still like the chat here, I feel like is going to take Bridges over Crowder, maybe just because of cost. I would go Crowder over Bridges.
It's Crowder for me. We've just seen them err towards giving him minutes more so than Bridges. The ownership is low enough on both guys. Like Jay Crowder is pulling 29% ownership on DraftKings. Bridges is 16%. I'm not saying that like Bridges can't play more minutes. I'm just saying that it's not just last game that we've kind of seen the Suns take the opportunity to play Bridges less. I'm not even necessarily saying I agree with them doing that, but it's what they've been doing often enough that, I think there is a lot of volatility in the playing time for the trio of Johnson, Bridges, and Crowder. Like someone in chat just mentioned that Crowder has to play more because of Scherer being out. That trio, there's more minutes available for them because of Scherer being out, but it doesn't have to be Crowder. It can be Bridges. If Bridges is playing really well, Cam Johnson can just, probably not play more minutes than he has, but Cam Johnson can benefit. It's basically there's more minutes for those guys in general, but it doesn't have to be Crowder. It certainly could be Bridges. I think it's more likely that it's Crowder, though, just based on how we've seen rotations look recently.
I saw this on OddsShopper, and I checked it here because all these books on OddsShopper are here legally in PA for me to go around. It was 10.5, really, I want to say the last 2, if not 3 games, hovering around there. It only bumped up Crowder's points total to 11.5, which and again, Adam, it's juice to the under, where we've seen this before at 10.5, juice to the under. I still don't think it's a smaller market with Crowder points scored. I get it than, Giannis or Booker. I still don't think the books have caught up to Crowder at 11.5. Look, 13.5, I think we have a conversation, but 11.5 seems way too close to 10.5, which seemed like an absolute smash for Crowder scoring points. Again, all I need is 12 tonight. I don't need him to break the slate.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have him at like 10. I have him at like 11.
Okay.
I
was hoping for like 30, a 12.5 from you, Matt.
If I give him 36 minutes, it gets me like 11 points.
36 minutes to 11?
Yeah.
What do you think the likelihood is of 36?
Pretty good. Like that's probably, I'll probably project him for 35 or 36. Okay. Like he certainly could play. It's kind of, I think it's kind of just like the middle ground where he can definitely play those 38 or 39 minutes again. He also can give you 32 or 33, and Bridges picks up a few more. So I think it's a reasonable middle ground. And also one other thing, and I agree with this point in YouTube chat. Someone said Crowder isn't giving you 3 blocks again. That's the only way his price makes sense. I agree with that. If you're just talking about Crowder's price, the reason that Crowder and Bridges too, because like I think Bridges is overpriced. Just if you're looking, at his median projection, like again, if you had multiple games to choose from, or this were a regular slate, and the way that Crowder and Bridges project to their salary, you wouldn't think twice about them. They both be horrible plays. But the reason that it sort of doesn't matter that much on a single game slate, in a lot of builds, in that last spot, you're going to get the guys that you want. You're going to get your value in. You're going to get your stars in. You're just going to have $7,500, or you're going to have $7,000. And it's kind of like, okay, well, do I redo my entire lineup just to not play Jay Crowder or Mikal Bridges? Or do I just accept they're the best option in this price range? And that's kind of what it is. It's a 1-game slate. So not every player in your lineup is going to be, a 6X projection or something.
A reminder here, it's beyond just no house advantage. Got to keep telling you about this because normally it's $20. Today it's $50 for you to sign up. Use our promo code Awesemo. We have another promo code for you for all the Awesemo Plus people who have already jumped in, $29.95 a week to take advantage of everything, not waiting 1 day a week for, like today, for example, some free tools, the single game showdown, ownership projections, top stacks, and UFC plays. Those are free today, but if you want them to you available across the board, it's $29.95 a week. But let's bump you up to Awesemo Plus Platinum, as you see there, Chris putting it up on the screen for you, the NBA Strategy Show. That is the name of the show, and that's the name of the promo that you use at checkout for 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. To put it in perspective, that's the ownership of Giannis at captain tonight, and we know how favorite and heavy of a play Giannis is. That's how weighted off you get for your first week, 25% off. That's a great deal. Again, NBA Strategy Show for your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum if you want to bump it up. Cam Johnson, I'm just looking at some of these lower cost guys. Can you call Cam, like, can you justify calling Cam Johnson a punt because of cost, like we called Manu Ginobili or Lou Williams a sixth man, even though these guys are playing starter minutes?
Yeah, I mean,
because he's the best one on the board, right? Like, you may not even need to get to Torrey Craig or PJ Tucker or Cam Payne if you're just spending the $4K on Cam Johnson. That was my point, I guess.
Yeah, Cam Johnson is the cheapest player on DraftKings that isn't going to make me want to throw up when I put him in my lineup.
How many guys are there on this slate tonight that make you want to vomit?
Yeah, PJ Tucker, not going to make you feel good. Torrey Craig, not going to make you feel good. Jeff Teague, not going to make you feel good. Cam Johnson, you're not going to feel great, but Cam Johnson is someone you put in and you're like, yeah, okay, I expect him to do fine. PJ Tucker, Torrey Craig, Jeff Teague, you're like, just please do not completely tank my lineup.
Okay, I could see that. It's like vodka Gatorade, where you're drinking a mixture of that all night. You're hydrated, but you're still drunk. You wake up the next day, you're a little surprised about how good you feel. That's rostering Cam Johnson versus like much. Moonshine all night is PJ Tucker.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the beauty of this is that because of Cam Johnson's price, again, you're not forced, or I don't feel like you really have to get to a lot of these other guys. You may see a lineup with, like, I would much rather have Cam Johnson as my low-cost guy and roster in a middle dude that we talked about, as opposed to stacking super high with high-cost guys and having Cam Johnson, Torrey Craig, and like a PJ Tucker in there, right? So I'd much rather go middle of the road with one or maybe two guys with Cam Johnson as my floor as opposed to Cam Johnson being anything other than my floor. Is that the right way to approach this?
That's kind of how I'm looking at it too. That's why that's why I really like, Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton as captains, because it lets you do that instead of, when you go to Giannis, you're kind of forced into that having to go to some really ugly plays. Whereas if you go Paul, Ayton, it's a little bit easier to get something like, Johnson plus Connaughton or something like that, and not have to spend, too much time with PJ Tucker and Jeff Teague and those guys down at the very bottom.
Yeah. And honestly, from a conversation that we've kind of had already, where I can get with Cam Johnson as my captain, I can get at least four of the top 5 to 6 guys from a cost standpoint, especially guys that we've talked about with Paul, Ayton, Giannis, and if it's a holiday that you'd slide in there. And you're really now back to Connaughton as your last option. So again, I mean, this is just a lineup that I just threw together really quick, right? This is not anything I would strongly suggest to play or stay away from. You're the guy to do that, Adam. I'm just saying Cam Johnson at the captain allows me to roster Giannis, Drew, DeAndre Ayton, Paul, and the last guy, and this is to the point of the conversation we were just having, the last guy doesn't have to be Jeff Teague or Torrey Craig. It's Pat Connaughton, who actually makes sense.
Yeah, I built that lineup earlier during the show, just when I was playing around with salary too. So right there on the same page with you. It's yeah, it just makes the lineup
this is
look
a
better.
bigger win for me, mind you, than it is for you. You know that, right? Like this may be a fade for you where it's like, oh shit, Shander just had the same lineup as me. Maybe I should move something. I'm looking at it like a victory. Like, yes, I'm on the same page as Adam.
Yeah, no, but I mean, to your point, it just opens up so much that you can do. And even if you don't go Johnson a captain, like even again, using Chris Paul a captain, the worst players in this lineup that I built, and you can obviously change things around, but like it's Cam Johnson and Pat Connaughton. I don't need to go to Craig. I don't need to go to Tucker. I don't need to go to Jeff Teague. Obviously, if you're playing a lot of lineups, there's going to be ones where you want to go to those guys because of what it opens up at the top, whether it's Giannis captain or whatever. But the point being, you can make some very good lineups where everyone in your lineup is likely to play at least close to 30 minutes, as opposed to playing the game where it's like, how many fantasy points can Torrey Craig score in 14 and a half minutes?
Yeah, I don't want to live that life tonight, man. Not with maybe 2 games left in the finals in the season. I don't want to live the life of sweating out 12 or 13 minutes of Torrey Craig. Jeff Teague, I mean, is he even going to play much at all tonight?
I wouldn't expect him to. I mean, he played 11 minutes last game. He's been playing like 10 to 12 minutes. I keep expecting that to come down. It hasn't, but again, like if you get, I mean, he's played at least 10 minutes in all 4 games of the series. He hasn't done anything. He hasn't scored more than 7.5 fantasy points. Not that that's necessarily the best gauge for what he's going to do going forward, but also it's just different in the postseason too. Even if Teague's going to get those minutes, it's not like during the regular season where, maybe Jeff Teague gets 12 minutes. And for a lot of those minutes, 2 out of 3 of Holiday, Middleton, and Giannis are on the bench and Jeff Teague's running the offense. When Jeff Teague's out there, he's still not, they're not saying like, all right, for these 10 minutes, we need Jeff Teague to score. It's more, we need Jeff Teague not to like completely screw up, and we need him to do as little as possible while getting the ball to Giannis, Middleton, and Drew. So it's kind of like a different role as well.
It's funny. I'm laughing in my head because I think normally this is the time of the show where we bring up dudes like Bryn Forbes, Frank Kaminsky, guys who are just bottom when it comes to cost. Teague was one of them, right? But again, this seems, and we haven't had many examples of this, especially in the single game showdowns, where there's no need to. Like, if you're going to get to Bryn Forbes tonight, that's because you feel like, and it may Adam or you collectively out there, you feel like Bryn Forbes is going to do something special. It's not like, oh my God, I need somebody at the end. We just covered that. You don't need to get to guys like Teague, like Craig, like Forbes, like Kaminsky, unless, and maybe Adam's thinking of something, maybe he's got the crystal ball going or something, unless you think Bryn Forbes is capable of outplaying, 8 or 9 minutes he may get tonight, or maybe a little bit more than that. But again, with the backdrop of we don't have to get to these guys, is there any real path to getting to these guys?
I don't think so. I mean, Forbes has just lost his spot in the rotation. Like, he played 5.6 minutes in game 2. He played 4.2 minutes in game 3, including garbage time, and he never left the bench in game 4. So if you're going to Bryn Forbes, you're just saying, I hope I get lucky, and for whatever reason, the Bucks decided between game 4 and game 5 that Bryn Forbes is going to take Jeff Teague's minutes, and Bryn Forbes is going to play 12 minutes at really low ownership. If you want to do that in like one or two of 150 lineups, then by all means. But I'll project him for like 0 to 4 minutes here. So it's not even like you're hoping to get lucky on his shooting. You're hoping he leaves the bench if you put him in a lineup. And the same goes for Kaminsky. Kaminsky had that one game where he was in tournament winning lineups. A lot of that was end of the game, garbage time. It was the game that Eytan was in foul trouble as well. But Kaminsky got abused in that game. He's been awful this entire series. We didn't expect him to remain in the rotation last game, and he didn't. He didn't leave the bench. You saw Jay Crowder getting the backup minutes behind DeAndre Ayton. Another reason to have, to feel a little bit more confident in Crowder tonight than Bridges. And I would expect that to continue, especially because the Bucks are playing so many minutes with Giannis at the 5. Like Frank Kaminsky is not doing anything there. Like it's going to be Crowder. So there's no like impetus for the Suns to put Kaminsky in there and hope he does well, because he's unlikely to do well, and the lineups they're going up against don't even really make sense for Kaminsky. So it's kind of the same thing where I don't think Kaminsky plays. If something weird happens, like if Ayton gets in foul trouble, he probably plays. If something weird happens, sure, Kaminsky is 1,400 and could score fantasy points, but like you're not hoping he plays well. You're hoping he steps on the floor for some weird reason.
We only have a couple of minutes left. We want to get to at least the Hall of Fame here before we get out, and a couple of props I wanted to throw at you. As we've covered everything from cash to tournaments, captain, MVP, from studs to punts and beyond. But let's get the Hall of Fame, at least get you out there in the Hall of Fame. As we said, maybe 2 games, if not 3 games left to do it here in the NBA. Download the profile pic from awesemo.com/avatar. Place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5K contestants. Tweet your wins, as you see here. Chris putting them up across the board to us. Mike with a big one at Awesemo HOF, and you'll win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. You can do some serious damage with a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So look at that. At Ship My Money DFS, the number 2 account tagged. I see you tagged all the time. I don't know why people, I think the misconception is because I'm hanging with you that I know what you know, but make sure you tag guys like Adam and Eric and Greg and Josh first, and then, me, if you have room on there. I want to see the wins, but Adam is the one you should be thanking for winning all these big dollars right there. That's pretty impressive, man. And still see him rolling through here. Right there, first 2. See it all the time, the profile pick up there. It's got to make Alex happy too. Man,
yeah, it's always nice. It's always nice to wake up to those after like I have a really bad night, like a huge losing night. And like the first thought is like, screw you, I'm jealous. And then it's like, okay, that's cool. At least somebody did well.
But you know what? And I've defended this mentality before we really started working together. And I appreciate it as far as like following you on Twitter, working with you. I appreciate that mentality so much more. Not that I didn't from the jump, because you have this sense of 2 things where it's like you don't buy into something just to buy into it, right? I feel like you're a very patient person. You're not like, oh my, prisoner of the moment. Oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And you're really competitive. Like you're not as good as you are in anything unless you're competitive. So I feel the same way. Like a friend of mine will get a good radio job. I'm like, man, screw this dude. And then I'm like, oh, hey man, I got to send him a text. And I've known him for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm really, really competitive. If I didn't win,
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's not dislike or hate or anything. It's just I want to win.
Yes. Trust me, it drives you. Absolutely. There are a lot of people out there who may think, no, come on. You have that in your own life. You just don't know it, or you're just not being honest with us. Last thing before we get out of here, I saw this prop, and I feel like every time it's out there, you kind of just have to take it. Giannis over a half 3. Like he's just going to, even if he's not making shots, he's not going to stop shooting, right?
I'm pulling up I think he's pulled back on that. Yeah, I mean, he's only taken 2 threes, and he's taken 2 threes in 3 of the 4 games in this series.
So you think, all right, so if anything, I would stay away.
Yeah, I think it's a good line. Under. I think it's a good line.
Too sharp to play?
Yeah, because I mean,
okay.
So you need him to take what, like 3? You said it's 0.5?
Yes.
So like you would need him to take 2+ threes.
Probably 3.5.
Yeah, you would like 3.
Yeah. Hey, NHA has him projected at 1.17. If you'd like to take advantage of it there, I wouldn't take advantage of it on a book because the juice has been sucked out. So
he's taken more than 2 threes in 2 of his last 8 games.
Oof. I thought the selfishness would return at some point, but I think not.
Yeah, I think they finally talked him out of just chucking the wide open threes.
They sat him down and said, dude, look, even the film is telling you to pass to Lopez with 3 guys on you.
Right. It's like maybe it's been happening the whole time, but like I feel like I've seen him like demanding the ball more, like yelling at Budenholzer on the sideline to draw him up a play. I feel like that was like their compromise. Like we'll draw you more plays, you can demand more plays, but just stop chucking threes.
All right. Thanks to everybody for rolling with us. Again, follow Adam on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. That's who you're going to want to credit for all your big wins tomorrow morning at Shander Show for me. Thank Chris in the chat. Leave us with a like and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Take advantage of that $50 match deposit at No House Advantage. You've got Greg and Terry coming your way next for MLB Strategy Show. Poor Greg, man. All this guy wants to do is focus on his son's futures ticket, and he's stuck talking baseball. No, he loves it. All right. Enjoy the next show. It's going to be juicy here, getting you ready for a busy day on the Diamond. We're back later tonight for Live Before Lock. A lot of things happening on the channel. Don't leave. Stick around. Thank you, and have a great day.